Hello, everyone. Welcome. Welcome to the fourth of six New York Forward Capacity Building webinars. My name is Stefan Lutter. I'm a revitalization specialist with New York Department of State. We are pleased to be joined today by my colleagues Melissa Keller, Pop Sisse, and Rachel Bruce. Through Governor Hochul's launch of New York Forward, the success of DRI is being brought to smaller downtowns, kickstarting revitalization across every region of the state. The application round of New York Forward has recently been announced with $100 million available in funding. Like the DRI, New York Forward communities will develop a strategic investment plan and compile catalytic projects that build toward a community vision for a revitalized downtown. As a reminder, here are important dates for this year's application. The due date is the application is due via the CFA portal for all regions except New York City on September 29th at 4 p.m. For New York City, applications must be emailed to your borough president office by September 8th at 4 p.m. Applications cannot and will not be accepted after the deadlines. These educational webinars aim to help New York Forward communities understand the basics of downtown revitalization planning. Whether you intend to apply for New York Forward this year or are interested in learning where to start, these webinars will help communities build the capacity needed to take on important planning initiatives. Over the course of these webinars, you'll be better equipped to apply for New York funding and indeed carry out the project if you are awarded. Please note that these webinars were recorded last year and are currently available on the DOS website, but they include some irrelevant references to previous dates and times. We will review the upcoming webinar, the correct dates for the upcoming webinars after the presentation. Please note that there is a recorded webinar dedicated to the DRI and New York Forward application process that has been posted to the New York Forward Capacity Webinar website. We can share that in the chat. During the webinar, please submit all questions as they arise into the chat box, and we'll answer those questions at the end of today's webinar. All questions received from the 6 webinar series will be compiled and posted as an FAQ on the Capacity Webinar website. Last Thursday, we talked undertaking community needs assessment. Today, we'll talk about formulating placemaking strategies and generating development interest. With that, I will share the video and we will get underway.
I'm joined by my colleague, Jessica Basher, who is the Executive Director of the Land Use Law Center. And then for those of you that don't know me, my name is Tiffany Zazula, and I am the Deputy Director of the Land Use Law Center. And today, just to step back a little bit and to remind you where we've been, these are the steps that we were looking at last week and the week before about accomplishing our revitalization process. From the very beginning, we started to talk about visioning and the importance of public outreach and public education in helping us create that vision. We discussed, again, the importance of engagement, how to leverage all of our existing community networks, and really maximizing public input. And this vision is going to help carry us through to the remainder of these steps. So we want to make sure we have our community fully involved in creating that vision for our downtown. And then we moved along and we learned last week about how to find all the data, the resources, and the information essentially that we might need to conduct our community needs assessment. And that is further input for us. And remember, we talked about a little bit how even our visioning sessions with our community began to talk about the beginning of community needs. But then we got more technical last week into understanding where we can find the information, the resources to really, again, assess what the community was telling us and what we need to know about some of the assets, the resources, and some of the obstacles for our downtown. And so now through the qualitative information, I'm going to move us one slide ahead because we're now moving into placemaking. I just want you to understand a little. You'll see the graphic on the right-hand side of your screen. But through the qualitative information of the engagement process, in conjunction with the information from the community needs assessment, right? These things are helping us develop now goals, right? Goals are what's going to help us identify and prioritize the action-oriented approaches we're about to take to sort of reach our vision, right? And we're also going to use these goals to help the community measure our progress and make adjustments where needed. So with our vision and with our community needs, we've set these types of goals. We're setting goals, right, to move us forward. And these goals, right, the next thing we would look at is our placemaking and our revitalization strategies that provide now those specific steps to achieving those goals. And that's what we're moving towards today, is really, what is placemaking, right? What are the elements around placemaking? What are the strategies to get there? And we're going to link some of that for you today visually with, samples from across the region. And we're going to show you what strategies look like, what goal statements look like, all again in furtherance of a community's vision. And so hopefully we can pull all those pieces together today. And then next time we're going to dive a little bit deeper into specific projects and then implementation itself. So that's where we're going. And I'm going to turn it to my colleague, Jessica, and we're going to get started on placemaking and what it is.
Thank you, Tiffany. So what is placemaking? Why are we talking about placemaking when we're sitting here trying to get ourselves in position to have a revitalization plan in place? And really, we have to think about what our ultimate goal is. What are we trying to achieve for our downtown revitalization? What type of place are we trying to create? And that's where placemaking comes in. So you may have heard of placemaking, you may have never heard of placemaking. One of the interesting things about placemaking is that there are many definitions. And so the definition that we're going to be using today is one of the broader definitions of placemaking, which is the process of creating quality places that people want to live, work, play, and learn in. Okay. And so to really understand that, we need to understand what quality places are. That's what we want our downtowns to be. And we need to define that and build that out in our goals and strategies. So as we go through this, we've peppered in a lot of visuals, because placemaking is about thinking creatively about our spaces and how to bring those different components together to make a quality place where people want to live, work, play, and learn. So I encourage you to take a look at the pictures as we move through. So what are quality places? So if we look at the different components, we have the form, our buildings, our built environment. That creates the stage for our quality places. And then we insert activity. That's the play. The response is how it makes people feel when they play and interact in these spaces that we've created. And finally, if we've done a good job, we've created an economic, a money-making way to sustain all of this. And so the play makes money as well as those nearby businesses. And the result of all of this is that sense of place. Kind of the ultimate goal of a really good downtown revitalization plan is to create that sense of place that achieves all of these results and is somewhere people want to be. So we can see how these pictures are showing an activated play space where people are, would like to be. So one of the big focus points of kind of the strategies and projects will center around form. So form, again, is that built environment. So form is kind of what the buildings look like, what the scale is, but then also ensuring that we're setting up a place, right, where we can have that play. So when we think about form, it is different for every community. We couldn't possibly do this presentation and be so specific to one community. So we have to think about how you adapt these different ideas to the scale that you're dealing with in your community. So whether you're a much smaller community, you have a bigger downtown space, a more built environment, less space, that density and scale has to be appropriate for your location. So we're not saying to go build it out and make this an urban environment. What we're saying is set the density and scale that's appropriate for your location. And then ensure you have that human scale where people can interact, and we have walkable, bikeable streets and trails, right? So people can interact and connect with that space as well. And that's really what we're building out in the form side, kind of setting the stage for that play that will come with that space. So you can see a nice image here of kind of that form in place that's really trying to bring some of those components together to ensure we have spaces for that play when we have that form built environment. So again, just more images, thinking of placemaking. We're trying to get you to think creatively about your community, how we create a sense of place. So what types of interventions do we need to include? So everything from creating, simple kind of investments in seating to bring people into spaces, to branding, to looking at the streetscape, to the facades of the buildings. You can see a lot of that in these images where they're really bringing all that together and reimagining what these downtowns can look like. And that's what placemaking is all about. It's really about kind of reimagining our downtown spaces to meet all of these goals and make that quality place where people want to come and play, right? So you can see people here wanting to play and tapping into that historic nature and the character of that community are important. All right, so now kind of we know broadly what placemaking is. It's where we're trying to get. It's where our revitalization plan is kind of aiming us towards is placemaking. But what is that vision? What do our community's needs say about what we're going to focus on in developing that placemaking? And there's basic facets that we know make up quality places. And that includes mixes of uses, effective public spaces, multiple transportation options, as well as multiple housing options, preservation of our historic structures, respect for the community heritage, arts, culture, and creativity, recreation, green spaces, sustainability, and broadband capability. So these different facets, as a community is thinking about the placemaking strategies that they would like to select, are often used in collaboration with each other, right, to create that vision and build out that vision that that community has put in place, but is also responsive to the results of that community needs assessment. So bringing those two pieces together to identify what those goals are and how they work together is essential to identify how to achieve that quality place. And these are the different facets that we're going to focus on. So what we're going to do with you over the next little bit less than an hour now is we're going to look at these different facets and we're going to look at examples. And we're going to go through those examples and talk about, okay, this is a community that was focused on, this particular facet. They also were looking at these other facets. And then exactly what type of language did they include in their plan, right, as goal language? And then what strategies did they include? So we have a large range of different places that we're going to be looking at, as you can see on the list on the next slide, where you can see that we have some communities from New York, from outside of New York that we're going to take a look at. And really, they look at these different facets. But again, it's not to say that they're only doing one of them in their planning. We're just looking at them as different examples of how to develop goals and strategies around a particular piece of this, but not to say that you're only going to do that. It's really about creating synergy between all of these different components. Okay, so you just heard a lot, right? So placemaking, maybe a new term for you, maybe not, right? Creating sense of place, a quality place, that's what we're aiming for with our downtown revitalization plans. And then how do we get there? How do we write those plans? What's the language? And kind of what are the ways that other communities have done that? And so what we really want to do is now look with you at some communities and kind of what they've developed. And Batavia is a really great example to look at, specifically for public realm, in the sense that public realm is probably one of the most traditional aspects of placemaking that people think of that are familiar with placemaking, is kind of that public space and activating and reforming that public space. But we're looking beyond that, right, with our definition of placemaking. So if you look at the vision that Batavia has, is they're all in to reshape the urban core by embracing and building upon its rich entrepreneurial history, right, fostering cultural appreciation, and creating healthy and vibrant community to benefit all. So what are the goals to achieving that vision? So you see here that they have 5 goals, starting with accessibility. What's great is you see right in that first goal that they want to provide opportunities for a diverse population of all ages and abilities to live, work, and play. Sound familiar? Right from our definition of placemaking. They want to make sure that there's synergy. The downtown revitalization projects will be complementary with each other, leveraging synergies among a mix of businesses, properties, organizations, uses, and investments. We don't want a lot of one-off projects. We want those projects to work together. The downtown will provide user-friendly networks to connect downtown with neighborhoods, businesses, institutions, recreational opportunities, and culture. So again, creating those networks is very important, and the linkages through transportation options. And then vitality. Downtown Batavia will attract residents and businesses through marketing, branding, high quality design, amenities, and arts and culture. So this is the one we're going to actually focus on. I'm going to read to you the opportunity one as well, just share that. Opportunity sound investments in downtown Batavia will create catalytic opportunities for growth, entrepreneurship, and long-term economic stability. So we need to make sure that this is economically viable, and we've created opportunities for this to be a sustainable place. But again, the one I want to focus here on is vitality, because that's where we see a lot of different components of what would be the investments in the public realm. So we see here some images from what they're trying to achieve, plans going forward, and some things that have already been achieved. And really, it's about activating that public realm, investments in that public realm, signage and branding. The image on the bottom right is a square, and using that square for public events, integrating arts and culture, facade improvements to ensure that surrounding historic buildings are contributing to that public realm. So let's take a look at what that looks like in the form of strategies. So if we're kind of building off the vitality goal, when we start drafting our revitalization plans, we have a goal, right? And we have a series of goals you saw on the previous slide a couple of slides ago that we're building off that vision statement that we talked about a couple of programs ago. So once we have those goals, we need to, as Tiffany mentioned, have strategies that are going to be our pathway to get there, right? We need to have something we can measure against and things that we can use to make adjustments when necessary. So the specific strategies to get that vitality that were identified in Batavia is to brand the downtown. So you saw that image of signage and bringing that in and branding the downtown so they can market their downtown, right? They can publicize events. That square that we looked at, that central square where they want to have a public realm for events, that's surrounded by historic structures, right? So those historic structures are important. And then you're thinking about what spaces are there. So parking lots. Are our parking lots maybe the most attractive places? Well, landscaping and buffering those parking lots, integrating green infrastructure into projects. So thinking about kind of resiliency and more greenery in the space, making that kind of walkable, area where people want to be. But again, those facades, redeveloping at that human scale, and then bringing in that art and cultural district and putting art into our projects. And so again, this is an example that really hits on a lot of the different things we see in placemaking. And we kind of see it develop from that broad vision to those specific goals, and then looking at this one specific goal as it then goes into more specific strategies, and particular identification of initial projects of where the community might get started and how they would reach their eventual goal. So here's an interesting kind of comparison example. If we look at a rural community out in Nebraska, where they really focused on kind of the public realm. And you see this image kind of looking at the bird's eye view of the community. You can see, it's pretty rural. You don't see a lot of built environment here, but it's still ripe for placemaking. It's still a place where interventions and creating that human scale and slowing traffic and making a place for people works. And so what they did is they invested in parklets and benches and curb extensions and fun programming to bring people back into the streets. So the streets were not just for cars, right? For people too. And this is even in rural communities out in Nebraska. So these placemaking concepts and these synergies of bringing everything together really kind of work in different contexts. And it's all about scaling it to the right approach that's necessary given your location for your community. So let's talk a little bit about kind of, as you can see, this tees up a lot of things about transportation.
Perfect. Thanks, Jess. Yes, multiple transportation options is.
Tiff, you're muted, sorry.
Yeah, thank you. So I'll start again. But multiple transportation options is a facet in placemaking, just like Jessica was talking about the public realm. So downtown should not only look about being just simply inviting, but they have to be easily accessible in a variety of ways. So linking transportation choices to existing public spaces is really key to creating a sense of place. So it's important to think of our space both as a pedestrian than as a bicyclist maybe, and even an automobile driver, right? All people, right, having access now to our downtown. And there are countless examples essentially of improvements and projects that communities are looking to undertake in order to enhance the public space of their mobility system. So Hudson, New York is quite unique because it has a variety of transportation options. And Hudson, New York, many of you probably know, but they do have a bridge district. And I love this. It's their build, renew, invent, develop, grow, and empower essentially district. So their bridge district, it's on the western side of downtown Hudson along, of course, the Hudson River. Now, their current transportation conditions in the bridge district were dominated, they saw, by two primary modes. They saw the automobile and rail for them, okay? And they saw that their pedestrian conditions, like their sidewalks, their crosswalks, were very varied on a block by block basis. It wasn't very consistent. They were lacking curbs, some areas were lacking sidewalks, and there were very limited amenities for biking. So this for them became just simply one of their placemaking goals. So you still see different goals here, right? But I'm pulling out just the transportation one to highlight again, you know, how they would want to develop a safe and accessible transportation option, improve circulation and connectivity, and prioritize complete streets redesign of streets within Bridge District. Now, Hudson, right, has a multitude of transportation options here. And so the only thing though I want you to see as you begin to look at some of the strategies and pictures is, yes, maybe your community is not as big, or maybe it doesn't have as many transportation choices, but the same principles apply, right? You're still wanting to think about those sidewalks, those curb cuts, the way that people feel safe while they are experiencing your downtown. And so you'll see images here, right, of course, of signage, right? If there is some type of public transit system, and that might be a bus, do you have clear signs of where that bus is? Do you have potentially, you'll see the shelter, the bus shelter, so that if it's raining, people are covered. It's a nice experience being at the corner there. You also see in a lot of the different images, of course, crosswalks here, greenery and buffers between, right, maybe your cars and your pedestrians. Again, the image on the right, a little possibly out of context of 4 lanes going down to 2, but still something to begin to think about is that how do we use our roads? Do we have space that maybe, again, that we're sharing with bicycles? What is the experience for everyone involved in that road system? And so, and honestly, sometimes just simply the greenery is an important piece of making the experience so much nicer for people as they're traveling around. And so I just want you to, again, look at the goal here, what we just highlighted before. And then there's these different strategies of improving the circulation south of with Cross Street for them, prioritizing that complete streets redesign of the streets, improving their public transportation options. Of course, for them, they had rails that needed to have safe crossings. And then again, same thing for trucks. And so again, specific for Hudson, but I want you to just see that pulling different strategies of accomplishing their goal, and again, bringing to life one of these facets that they think is important for their revitalization of their community. And there's a few more, sorry, I forgot how many more there were. They've quite a few. I don't have to go through all of them, but again, just take a look. One of the ones that I think is important to highlight though, is that link. If you'll look at that, the 5th strategy down is the link to the regional bike trail network. Again, thinking through how our bikes might be able to come from a trail into our downtown. So here we go.
So when we think about transportation options as a key component and facet of placemaking, you know, do you have those transportation options? The other thing that will likely come up in any community's community needs assessment will be also housing options. And whether the community has those housing options really dictates whether you have a quality place, you know, under kind of this umbrella of placemaking. And so ensuring that is very important. And so looking at the vision and using Kingston as an example, we can clearly see in this vision statement, which is a bit longer than some of the others. So you can see there's no one size fits all when writing a vision statement. This has multiple sentences in it, but clear language that part of that vision is retaining and attracting current and future residents. Develop models that support equity and making it a welcoming home. And in order to do that, we need to ensure that we have housing options within our communities. And again, a central facet of placemaking and a quality place. So you can see here that their goals hit on a lot of those different facets that we've been talking about, that mixed use and economic base and creative culture, as well as the mobility aspects that Tiffany just covered. But their last goal on this list is support new development and rehabilitation of existing buildings to provide additional affordable housing opportunities and housing accessibility for all residents. And important to note is it says in the SBD. So the SBD is the Stockade Business District, and that's the particular district that Kingston has identified that they're focused on in this revitalization plan that they're working on. And so they're very focused on efforts in that historic district that they have. So what do we mean by housing options? What do we see happening in Kingston? Well, the image on the right is a historic structure. It's a mixed use project that includes housing. So we also saw a facet of placemaking is that mixture of uses. And so it includes affordable housing. So projects, development projects are strategies, right, that we see under this umbrella. But we also see kind of broader things that communities can do, like development of programs. And so how they develop programs to support housing is also important. And then thinking about kind of our existing building stock. Many of the projects at this scale are not necessarily going to be the new development, but the redevelopment of existing buildings and thinking creatively about that. So where is your building stock that's available for this? And oftentimes it is maybe the upper floor of a kind of Main Street retail space or something like that, where you can create more options, right? Different types of options for housing. So let's look at specifically how these play out into drafting strategies when Kingston took a look at this. And so again, we have that goal, but the strategies that came from that were to support public infrastructure to benefit equitable business and development in the SBD. So jobs, right? We need businesses to support this equity component, but then also to promote ownership for low and moderate income households through programs such as revolving loan funds, private activity bonds, land banks, and community land trusts. So again, it's not just about kind of identifying projects that are specific development projects, but also programs that can help support the development of those projects. And finally, the third strategy here is work with existing affordable housing partners. So who are our partners, right? Go back to that first session on visioning and identifying the partners available in your community. And how we're going to keep tapping into them as we move into strategies, but working with those housing partners to determine best strategies for enhancing the supply of affordable housing. And a project that we just saw on the previous slide is a great example of that, where a housing partner in the community developed that project that included those affordable units.
Okay. So following up on that is essentially the facet of diversity, which we are seeing again as a placemaking strategy. So people want to live in vibrant places with promising social and economic opportunities. So as our municipalities are becoming more diverse economically and racially, it's increasingly necessary to ensure that we have places and the people who live there that don't feel isolated and don't feel displaced. So local leaders have been thinking about ways to having their thriving communities that are now fostering equitable development and social inclusion. So again, communities are promoting diversity and a diverse social interaction as an element of placemaking. It's respecting its people, it's respecting its cultural heritage, and it's thinking creatively about creating really safe spaces where groups can celebrate and pride themselves on that social diversity of their community. And so to highlight here, the village of Westbury in Nassau County, it prides itself on cultural and social diversity of its community. And it's proud to be one of the most diverse communities in Long Island. And they support projects that, again, that have existing, that are support their diverse community. And then that fosters their continued diversity among all the new residents that are coming in. So it's, again, this is a big priority for them. So one of their placemaking strategies, actually, which I'm going to talk about, is called the Diversity Project. And it focuses on here improving key neighborhood and institutions that offer opportunities for community building, right, among all of its diverse residents. It is trying to increase and diversify the housing stock that Jessica just talked about to allow for more residents to come live in their downtown. They're attracting new businesses that are going to meet the variety of their residents. And so again, this goal, diversity, retain that existing diverse population. You see in the images here, one of the things that they did do, Westbury, is during their visioning sessions for their downtowns, they really went out and tried to do a lot of public engagement with its citizens to understand the programming, to understand the activities that their diverse community wanted to see in their downtown. And so you see images of that here. And again, they're trying to roll out many of those activities within the spaces that they have. And again, some of these strategies are already covered, but to support that goal, you know, facilitating improvement to key community assets, ensuring parking capacity to meet the needs of residents, establishing a retail mix that supports that diverse community, and encouraging the development of diverse housing options. So again, a unique and wonderful way of you know, celebrating its community, its residents, its cultural heritage, and again, a placemaking strategy for Westbury.
Yeah, and we see that kind of you know, tying everything back to the culture and history as a key component of placemaking. And so it kind of also comes up in that kind of historic preservation lens, you know, thinking about not only the culture and in the community, but also the historic buildings, you know, looking at more kind of through the building stock perspective as well. And so if we look at Hornell, that's really something that they were focused on, and you'll see this a lot, especially as we kind of talk about and work on, you know, revitalization plans with smaller communities. It's less likely that it's going to be new development, but more about preserving the cities or communities at different scale, historic character, through the revitalization of vacant, underutilized buildings, which in often case are historic buildings. I just want to take a moment to kind of, again, point out, you know, we're highlighting, you know, particular facets in each of these communities, but see that the vision, the goals are still hitting on all the different facets that we've been talking about. And different communities, based on their vision and their community needs assessment, are kind of developing their own strategies, bubbling up the ones that are most important and relevant based on those community needs and the visioning sessions, and then having those. So I just want to be mindful that Hornell is only about historic properties. We see it in a lot of them, but it's really about the appropriate mixture and balance for each community that really achieves and responds specifically to the vision and community needs assessment. So you see the walkability and the public spaces and these other goals, the city living, you know, making sure that there's housing, the vibrant centers, and the economic side for working and learning. So all those pieces are here, not just the ones that we're playing up. So just want to kind of remind you of that, as we're not kind of going to read you every single piece. But I also want to note something, you know, think about drafting, right? Drafting goals, and take a pause here. Think about these words they're using: preserve, provide, increase, establish, right? They're all actions about what they're going to do around these different kind of themes and facets. And drafting, you know, plans, and, you know, if this is something that, you know, you're doing on, you know, on a budget, this type of language is really important. And looking at lots of examples and understanding how communities kind of go through this visioning and apply it to the community's assessment is important. So in this session, the preserve the city's, the goal is the preservation goal. And so let's look at some images about Hornell. And I think this is going to be a very commonly identified in the community's assessments done, you know, for multiple communities probably participating in this call. So here we see some of those buildings and some of the plans for the vitalization. They have buildings, about 30 buildings, and they're downtown that are historic in this historic district. Many built, you know, at the turn of the century, the last century, and in need of revitalization. Many are underutilized or vacant. And so they really needed to kind of think about that building stock and how to tap into it to achieve some of the other needs that the community had. So, you know, in doing that, they can preserve the historic buildings, but also look for opportunities to fill some of the other needs as it relates to economic development and housing as well. So let's look specifically at the strategies that they developed in order to kind of, focus on that preservation goal. So promote the adaptive reuse of underutilized buildings in the downtown to support a mix of uses. So the starting place that we had is the first facet under placemaking was a mixture of uses. We have an opportunity here because we have this stock of underutilized buildings that we can look to for some initial project ideas about how we can get those mixture of uses. And oftentimes what we see is adaptive reuse. Maybe the building isn't intended or appropriate to be used for whatever it was used for, maybe when it was built in 1910. So thinking about how we reuse these buildings. They also oftentimes have underutilized upper floors where housing and office space can also come into play and be cited. So supporting that as a key strategy in achieving this historic preservation goal. And then also investing in infrastructure improvements that facilitate the reuse and sustainability of that downtown building stock. So, the community can step in and they can help promote reuse and they can support investment in the upper stories. They can also invest directly in the infrastructure improvements that might be needed that help to facilitate those projects as well. So, you can see a few goals here. We can look at this example, I think is really interesting, out of Arizona, where they're also looking at a very different style, right, of historic building stock, but great examples of adaptive reuse. In this case, small community, they had kind of these 3 core historic buildings that made up the downtown. So they focused on making sure that those were revitalized to have that center point in good condition and activated. But also they had a historic school building that was restored to create a living and working space for the artists to support a creative economy. So one of the facets that we'll talk a little bit more about, but you saw early on, was this whole kind of bringing arts in. So this preservation coming together with arts to support that creative economy. They also included something where they revitalized an old elementary school building. So maybe you have buildings, again, with adaptive reuse that are no longer needed for their current purpose. And in this case, it was renovated into an inn and conference center. Bring people to the community, right? And then finally, they wanted to respect that, in many cases, maybe we've lost and demolished neighborhoods in different decision points in the development process with our historic preservation. And they really wanted to kind of pay some tribute to the loss of those neighborhoods and those residents. And so they created this public art installation in one of the parks that features remembrances from residents from those previously demolished neighborhoods. So part of their preservation strategy was not just, preserving the existing building stock, but also recognizing the loss of some of that building stock into some of the art installations in the park where they put it, but, incorporating that into their plan as well.
Great. So another facet we see communities sort of look at are also their anchors and their incubators. And so universities, community colleges, museums, libraries, hospitals, performing arts centers, sports arenas, anything like that. There's an array of institutions that really can contribute to the culture, economy, and vitality of our downtown. So these so-called, quote, anchor institutions, they can't easily pick up and leave our community, hopefully. So they have this special importance to the remaking of our community and its future. And so they have a special reason to want to be instrumental in shaping their community's future. And so again, thinking about whether or not you have some type of anchor institution within your downtown and highlighting that and building upon that can be really important. And what's nice too about anchor institutions is that they think of themselves as institutions whose success, again, depends in part of the success of the community in which they reside and vice versa. So they're there to hopefully position themselves and work with the municipality to, again, contribute to its success. And so there can be a lot of different even public-private partnerships between anchor institutions and the community themselves. And it's nice because some of our anchor institutions, depending on who they are, could be particularly imaginative and thoughtful about the real estate that's around there, about the architecture, maybe the landscaping, and invest, right, and lead to some of that increased desirability in our downtowns and the surrounding neighborhoods. So again, all creating a great place to live, work, and play. It's important to those anchor institutions as well. On the other hand, we see some other communities looking to embrace the idea of startups and incubator employers to really strengthen their economic diversity of their downtown. And so they're looking at whether or not they have that space and the mixture of uses, again, to have an incubator or a startup business come to their municipality. So focusing in on that. So looking here at Oswego in central New York, they're really building upon the momentum of recent investments by the private and public sector through collaboration with their anchor institutions. So not only do they have them and they're setting around, again, placemaking strategies around them, but they're also collaborating with those anchor institutions and really catalyzing pivotal economic vitality in their downtown. So they have, of course, SUNY, a SUNY school there, SUNY Oswego, and Oswego Health. And a host of cultural amenities that I'm about to show you. So here, this picture just shows you again I think it's their children's museum on the bottom right-hand side, and their theater, which continues to draw people downtown. And they're renovating as well a Price Chopper building into a mixed-use actual startup business incubator facility to support light industrial to help service some of their businesses. So again, really creative ways of capitalizing on some of the people, institutions that are there within their community. And so again, we highlight for all of you, just in case you want to come back, and this is for you, right? That goal of retaining and growing businesses, and then these different strategies of partnerships, of expansions of local businesses, of prioritizing, mixed use development, leveraging those existing growth sector, increasing their workforce training programs, and so on and so forth. And so again, a unique placemaking strategy for one of our New York communities.
I just want to also remind everybody, I know there's a lot of information in these slides that hopefully is getting you thinking, and you might want to look closer at some of it, that the slides as well as the video will be posted on the same page where you registered for this program. You will also receive an email once all of that is posted, providing you the link. So I just want to make sure that everyone knows you'll have the video and these slides to reference or to share with anybody you think also needs this information. Okay, so let's take a look at Penn, which is a really interesting example where kind of digging in deeper to that kind of jobs and economic stimulation and mixed uses and activation of spaces is focused on local food and beverages. So they have a lot of the same things that we're seeing kind of in placemaking, the natural assets, the arts, the creative economy. But one interesting thing is this, focus on local food and beverages, and even more specifically on the regional agricultural economy. So many of you might be on, being the center part or, surrounded by a regional agricultural economy, thinking tapping into that, or you're part of it more directly within your community, is a great way of kind of building that placemaking strategy. So how do we attract visitors and people? Well, great food, right? And great events and great restaurants is a way to do that. We have this phenomenon of increasing numbers of breweries across the state. So this goes to locally produced foods, beverages, products, goods, and services downtown. So, avoiding food deserts and having locally produced food. Downtown Penyon's long-term vitality will be improved by supporting and promoting the bounty of its rich regional agricultural economy. So let's take a look at what that means. So it's not just the building of the restaurants, right? And maybe using some of those historic spaces and redeveloping them. It's also about creating opportunities through things like Tiffany mentioned, like incubators. So in the case of food, providing those commercial kitchen spaces, as you see the Millie's Pantry, on the second floor of the space, having that, type of, business incubator, shared space opportunity, but also then promoting the locally produced food, incorporating it into the restaurants, and kind of building that synergy. So there's lots of opportunities and ways to do this that are not just maybe the traditional kind of setting up more restaurants and tapping into that local production, but also through kind of supporting businesses and helping with events and marketing. So let's look specifically at what those strategies are that they included and how they drafted that, specifically into strategy language. So encourage farm to table relationships among local producers, processors, and restaurateurs. So creating that linkage directly between the development and opening of restaurants and the revitalization of those buildings and bringing people, but also trying to get those farm to table relationships that's supporting that agricultural regional economy, which is a placemaking strategy, right? How many people go to that local farm to table restaurant? It draws visitors. It's an asset of healthy, fresh, local foods for our residents as well. And so a really interesting kind of a strategy. Celebrate the variety of unique artisan foods, craft beverages, seasonal produce, and other offerings through downtown festivals, events, and markets. So again, this is that activation, that play space. So we need to, have those public realms and the places and buildings to support these events, but we also need to celebrate them and link it in with the artisan foods and craft beverages and locally produced goods through hosting those actual events as well. So I also mentioned kind of the startups and helping to have the incubate local processors and food related startups downtown. So again, it doubles, right, with the idea of what do we do with these spaces? How do we revitalize them? What are the uses? Well, one of the uses can be an incubator for processing for startup companies that are linking and supporting our local agricultural community, right? So we can see it all kind of coming together and then integrating agritourism into the local tourism promotion. So, promotion, marketing, getting the word out, we saw that flyer on the previous screen is a key strategy as well. So some interesting strategies here that are not just kind of about the form and the buildings. You can see the direct linkage, but a lot of them are about programs and developing those relationships and supporting businesses. So kind of building off of all those other facets that we've been talking about up until this point. But again, linking, so thinking about communities at different scales. So maybe your community is located in a region where this is particularly relevant and important, and your communities would kind of show that. Supporting that agricultural base as well. So Utica, Mississippi is a really great example of like a direct linked revitalization plan to the agricultural history of the region. They developed opportunities to actually help small farm apprentice programs and then plan for the development of a greenhouse, as well as a storytelling program, getting the word out through these kind of softer, programmatic, kind of interactive types of things. As well. And this organization called SIP Culture is very interesting kind of with the small farm apprentice program of what they developed. But again, a direct piece of the revitalization plan was activating and connecting with that agricultural history.
Okay, perfect. And of course, we'd be remiss if we didn't talk about the arts and culture, right? Leveraging creative talent and cultural assets can really help stimulate and enhance economic growth and vibrancy in our downtown. So we all know that arts and cultural resources play a very unique role in placemaking, and they but by offering space for people and organizations to really come together, to connect, to learn, and to create. So these assets bring numerous economic benefits we've seen, such as jobs and tax revenues and tourism dollars. And so again, I think many of us already know and recognize that the arts can aid a community in solving some of its problems and building relationships and then forming culture. And we've seen many communities bring performance and participatory activities related to arts and culture to activate the space itself from the very beginning. So we've seen some communities take very empty spaces. They become crowded quickly and simply because of a concert, a festival, an art installation. So public art can be used at the very beginning of this process and can be essential for placemaking because it creates that energy and that change and the aesthetics of a place all happens around like arts and culture. And so here we're looking at Rome, New York. Rome has a compact, walkable downtown, and it has a variety of pieces here that it wants to, have a thriving retail, dining, cultural, and entertainment destination. But then you're looking at that big vision of activating the arts and cultural and establishing its downtown as a hub for arts and culture. And they have a goal here then of celebrating and leveraging existing historic and cultural resources, again, creating that type of hub. And so you look here at the pictures, Rome has very numerous active organizations. It's established in sort of an arts base there, and it includes, the Historic Capitol Theater and the Reach Center Arts Incubator. And so all different places, again, that they're trying to highlight that become, again, specific projects for them for their placemaking. And I just want to show you quickly some of the strategies here around it, but again, supporting, grassroots and arts and culture initiatives as well. So, and then what we're looking at in just a second is actually different, different area from New York. But in Fergus Falls in Minnesota, it really helped, again, develop a strategy called Creative People Power. And so they were going to use essentially their people to become that placemaking strategy, their creative people. And so they were finding ways of supporting artists, right, to help them make a living. They were having artists at the table for their community engagement sessions. Again, this is something that would come out as their placemaking strategy. Again, this idea of hubs and homes for creativity. And then I love this, but they had something called Lots of Little. And I think this works well for some of our smaller communities because Lots of Little focused on just creating small, simple projects here and there instead of one major overhaul, right? They were building towards a major project. They were building towards something big, but they did lots of little. They just tried different strategies of, placemaking little strategies around arts and culture to sort of activate that space once again. And so, again, our citizens need the infrastructure to tap into their own people power, and we want to tap into people's creativity. And we want to use, again, arts and culture are a very simple way to start activating spaces quickly and can be, again, a whole placemaking strategy.
All right. So recreation, natural spaces. Many of you might be thinking kind of your community assessment will likely maybe identify a need for a linkage or that you have a lot of these spaces or that they need to be updated. So an asset or some need to kind of revitalize these spaces, but they're an opportunity too. And a central piece of placemaking. How do we create quality places? We're linking to our natural resources and creating recreational opportunities are central to that. And so in this example from Owego, they really focus on that as a separate goal within their plan where they wanted to ensure that they create opportunities for recreation to draw visitors, right? So we can bring people in and maybe support some of our businesses and community, and also connect residents to local natural resources to provide year-round activity for residents. So we're activating the play, we're creating spaces, we're bringing visitors in, so we're helping to support our economic base as well. So there's a lot of opportunities here. And again, you can keep seeing kind of all those placemaking facets as we look at this. So here's some images of kind of that recreation, natural resources, what they have and how to get people access. So trail systems and amenities that can support that access as we start to identify kind of early project ideas as part of this process as well. So it's, that vision that kind of identifies that based on the vision of the community. The needs assessment kind of informing us on the kind of more specifics of what you have, not only in your community, but what you can link to in your region. And then, what we might do to respond to that. And so we can see in these images some information from what they're kind of looking at. So specifically, their strategies are to enhance the connectivity to the waterfront. So if you are a community that is a waterfront community, you'll almost always see in that downtown revitalization plan is that connection to the waterfront is essential for the enjoyment of local natural resources, including opportunities for recreation, tourism, and outdoor activity. And then improve park and open space assets to improve quality of life for local residents and attract new residents and visitors. So we want this for our current residents, but maybe we also can use this to attract new residents and visitors. So again, that kind of bringing people in aspect as well as the quality of life for existing residents. Excuse me. If we're thinking about communities that are smaller in scale or linked to and surrounded by natural resources, this is an interesting example of a trail town program. Excuse me, focusing on revitalizing rural communities by growing outdoor tourism and small businesses. And it's really about creating that linkage. So We see a lot of activity around linking trail systems, and this is an example of doing that with revitalization in mind specifically.
Perfect. All right. And then just to follow up on that, we're starting to see this as sort of a newer facet that many communities are integrating into their placemaking initiatives is sustainability. Downtown revitalization and sustainability, they often work really nicely together because downtown redevelopment is inherently sustainable, right? Why? Because downtowns are generally more walkable, they're bikeable. We talked about some of this, they're possibly more transit friendly, right? So less maybe greenhouse gas emissions from automobiles. Maybe we're promoting again some of the things that Jessica was talking about, healthy outdoor activities. We have density and a mixture of land uses. So again, greater opportunities maybe for renewable energy or community energy systems. And there's a concentration of people, right? And so there's a restaurants, and we're creating a market for maybe locally sourced food. Again, good for public health and the agricultural economy. So again, a sustainability mindset, we're beginning to see again more municipalities incorporate into their goals, into their vision, and you know, again, improving the life of their citizens. And so here you see a huge vision statement from the city of Geneva, who went through a visioning process in 2016 in their comprehensive plan. And then I'm going to keep reading forward, but the citywide vision statement provided this roadmap for public and civic resources. And it started to note that Geneva was more beautiful, more prosperous, more equitable, more connected, and more sustainable community than it is, you know, than it was before. And that's what they're trying to create more of that today. And so you have beautiful, prosperous, equitable, connected, and sustainable as the goals in order for them to create that vision. And they see themselves as stewards of the natural historic resources that balance preservation, long-term growth, and community development. And so if you take all of these things together, again, we're looking at sort of that sustainability lens. And so they have a bunch of pieces here that they're leveraging. But what was interesting is if you look at some of their projects that they would move forward with that sustainability lens. So it takes it to sort of a whole new level with one of its signature projects now called the Lake Tunnel Solar Village. And it's a net zero community on Seneca Lake, and it derives all its energy from clean and renewable sources. And so it used to be a parking lot and a vacant property that was owned by the city. And now it's, you know, it's a thriving green community on the lake, and it's generating taxes. And there's a linear path from the downtown to this project itself with several amenities along the way, like a dog park and an ice rink. And it leads up to this courtyard of Solar Village. And there's been public improvements and streetscape improvements. Again, thinking through the mobility and public realm things we talked about before. Again, bringing all of these pieces together. They have a pedestrian tunnel now that is connecting to the lakefront, giving people access to the lake. So variety, again, this project is just something that they highlight as one of their sustainability projects. But as I said, the goal with these strategies of enhancing the Seneca lakefront through projects that connect residents with the water is important to them, creating accessible and safe connection to the natural resources, encouraging the projects that reduce the environmental footprint. Again, all things that Geneva is doing to create a more sustainable placemaking initiative.
All right, well, we just gave you a whole lot of information and hopefully a whole lot of ideas and a whole lot of examples. So where were we? Where are we going? And what did you just hear? So we've been walking through this revitalization planning process. We started talking about visioning and talking to your community and what's their big ideas, right? What do they like in their community? What don't they like? What are their ideas? And then you kind of got that quantitative information with that community needs assessment. And Kevin walked you through the data that you can use to inform your decisions and what information about your, historic properties and natural resources and economic base and housing. So what do you have in your community? What don't you have? And then how do you take those together? And today we talked about placemaking strategies and how we think about a goal, of our downtown revitalization plan is to create a quality place. Using that definition of placemaking, that's what we're trying to get by looking at these different facets of what makes up placemaking, right? What constitutes a quality place? How do we activate the form and the play to create a sense of place that creates economic base and stability for our downtowns? And so we talked about a lot of different strategies. We looked at that language for drafting. Hopefully it got your kind of creative juices flowing and kind of a better understanding of what that language might look like, how you might draft it, what type of strategies you might include. Every community is going to be unique. You're going to have a different vision. You're going to have unique community needs, right, based on your assessment. And so your strategies are unique, but you can use some of these principles to really kind of decide and look at some of these strategies and look back at some of these examples. So we teed up some initial projects here, and in the next couple of programs, we're going to get much more specific about those projects and implementation and the more details about kind of, ushering projects through the decision-making process, as well as, funding and land access issues and things like that. So stay tuned, come back on the 25th and 28th.
I think I was muted. So with this webinar, we're seeing how our previous discussions on community visioning, public engagement, and community needs assessments culminate into this creation of goals and placemaking strategies. As was mentioned, if you want to go back and review this or any of our other previous webinars, they will all be posted to our New York Forward website for future reference. With that, we also want to remind you that we do have 2 remaining webinars in this series. On August 24th, we'll talk about project development. We'll discuss taking these placemaking concepts and strategies and developing those into a set of transformative projects for your downtown. And then lastly, on August 29th, we'll talk about the implementation of the revitalization plan, moving really from that planning phase into implementation itself. Lastly, if anyone has any questions, please put those in the chat box and we'll take any questions for the last few minutes. Great. Maybe just put one last call for questions. I'm not seeing anything in the chat just yet. All right. Well, thank you everyone for joining us today, and we'll look forward to seeing you on Thursday.